We now come to item number 10, which is a decision on the proposed new signs bylaw and associated controls. We had three members, council members and two council members and one IMSB member, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Henderson and independent member Wilcox on the hearings panel. Could I ask maybe Councillor Cooper to move and Councillor Henderson to second the recommendations, and I'll call on Councillor Linda Cooper to introduce it and then ask Paul Wilson as our Senior Policy Manager to add any other relevant comments. Councillor Cooper.
Tēnā koe, Mr Mayor. So this item is we've given you recommendations from the panel on the proposed new signs bylaw, and which replaces the Auckland Council and Auckland Transport Signs bylaw. So it's bringing the two together to make it more sensible and easier to understand, which I'm sure all of you who are standing for re-election will be happy you only have to look at one sign bylaw instead of two when you're putting up your signs. So first of all, I want to thank Councillor Shane Henderson and IMSB member Glenn Wilcox we spent days and hours on this, hearings and deliberations, and as usual, Glenn really put his heart and soul into it, and he brings that different worldview to it. So I'll take it as read, but we did put this out for notification on August the 26th, and we had on September we adopted it August the 26th. We had a month of consultation, and we had 76 people and 30 organisations provided feedback, and what we're giving you here is, we think, some really sensible approach to how we manage signs, but just to note that this did not include alcohol signage. We had a separate process for that, a hearing process, and Councillor Bartley, my deputy on the Regulatory Committee, and Councillor Afeso heard those, and they are going to manage those in the way they see fit, lobbying government. So I don't know whether you wanted to comment on that. No. So I just commend this to you for adoption, and if there's any questions, myself or Paul are happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And if I can just ask Paul Wilson if there's anything that he'd like to add to it. Paul.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing further to add. Happy to answer any questions.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention, I'm very sorry to the directors from AT, because we don't usually do this, but we had the pleasure of having board directors from AT, Kylie Clegg and Darren Linton, and it was absolutely invaluable having their point of view as well, though we had to get agreement 5 times on everything, but it was really worthwhile. So it's really good to see us as CCO and Auckland Council working more closely together, which I think all of you will be pleased about.
Thank you very, very much for that, Councillor, and that reminded me that this is a joint bylaw with Auckland Transport, and I understand that this was it has to be passed by both the Auckland Transport Board and ourselves. I understand Auckland Transport board considered it this morning. Paul,
it passed.
It's been passed.
It's been adopted. Sorry, I should have.
Okay,
when I go off script, that's what happens.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. No, I just wanted to get clarification of that. So we'll open it up for questions now, and the first question is from Councillor Papacoon. Councillor Coon.
Oh, tēnā koe te koro matua. Thank you for this, and do want to acknowledge and thank all the work on the panel. Do really appreciate it that you do that behind the scenes, and thank you officials as well for the work on this. I just have 2 brief partai. The first one is in relation to the LED signage, which is a big issue in the city centre for residents. I know that this isn't covered by this bylaw, but can I just get an understanding, I think it's about where that's going to be dealt with, and if there's any work and train about that?
Maybe go to Paul for that.
Can I ask that question to, kia ora, Paul.
Hello, thank you, through Your Worship. insofar as this bylaw is concerned, there are rules around illuminated signs. The bylaw panel did have quite a wide-ranging discussion. There was concerns raised about reviewing the illumination levels. And the decisions were to make sure that we're aligned with those levels that are in the unitary plan for consistency, and at the same time acknowledging that when the unitary plan comes up for review, that there will need to be a bit of a wider discussion around what those illumination levels are. Insofar as illumination outside of signs, that's a matter for the unitary plan. Thank you.
So that's like on a 2026 timetable. We won't be able to do any review before that?
That would be something that we need to raise with the plans in place. I'm not aware of their program timing, that is.
Okay, thank you. I'll take that away. And if I just may, just one other quick query, and that's around, this extends prohibitions, for example, on portable signs to the whole city centre. Is there going to be compliance issues that this is going to put more work onto compliance staff? And as we know, there's a lot of pressure in that space at the moment. So are we resourcing the need for more compliance staff?
I don't think Paul can really answer that because he's not in the compliance team. But I guess when we're making these decisions, I mean, those are a consideration, but you don't make bylaws in relation to how many staff you've got to monitor them. But we always, in our bylaws, that's out of scope for the bylaw, but what we always do is we always have another basket, another kete of things that are out of scope that we send to the relevant departments. And so any of that raised in any bylaws, we send that to our regulatory compliance. We often have them sitting in the room during deliberations so we can ask questions. But really, I think, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't make bylaws to suit how many staff we have at any particular time. But we're really aware that if you make bylaws, it's got to have the ability to be enforced. So I think that's really where it lies. We send any concerns we have off to regulatory compliance, but Paul might want to add.
Thank you, Councillor. Paul, anything you'd like to add to that?
Just to add that certainly the compliance staff have been along with us and looking at how this new rule will be implemented, and they'll also be looking to work with their existing relationships, including with the Heart of the City, in order to work out how best to make shop owners aware and to increase voluntary compliance.
Thank you very much. Next question, Councillor Chris Darby.
Thank you, Mayor. I was on the call for the Auckland Transport Board meeting this morning. The item was quite brief. It appeared that the board had probably considered it in a workshop and had posed most of its inquiry there. I did hear the lead officer say that this was not a material review. This was more about bylaws, coming together. Paul, is that your view, that it was not a material review?
Certainly through your worship, the overall, this bylaw is very much around consolidating, they described it as 3 bylaws into one. And for the majority of the rules, we're retaining the current intent and effectively giving it a big facelift to make it easier to read. There were some key changes that were put through, and they were highlighted in the statement of proposal, such as the portable sign ban extension, increasing the size of wall-mounted signs in heavy industrial zones, which you would have heard about there, and and so there were some there were some key changes, but the majority of the current rules and certainly their intent were retained, and that's why they described it in that sense.
So we haven't got a lot of public feedback, have we, to going out upon seeking public feedback? I heard the number 106 submissions at the Auckland Transport Board. Councillor Cooper's mentioned 76, but I guess that's the
individuals.
Maybe they're the
and 30 organisations, Councillor.
Individuals. Right. Is that the level of public engagement that we would have expected on this? How many do we have when we last looked at this? I think it was some 6 years ago.
Yes, there were more feedback received the first time we went out, although again we need to compare what it was that we're going out with. Back in 2015, we were going out to create a brand new bylaw from scratch for the very first time from Auckland Council, and so it did attract more attention. Whereas this one, when we put out the proposal, was very much along the lines of, for the most part, we're retaining the current rules, and here are the things that we are changing that you need to pay attention to. So it is to be expected that there would be less feedback for that reason.
Thanks. Look, just one other question, Mayor. Real estate signage is, I have an opinion on that, and having worked in that industry, I know what the real estate sign is for. It's not to advertise the property. Real estate signage is now allowed to be illuminated, I've discovered. Mind you, it was allowed to be illuminated prior with little solar illumination. It's allowed to be on the public verge. It's allowed to distract motorists. It's allowed to do a lot of things because of the location that we're allowing it to be in. Was there any understanding or informing of those making the decision on real estate signage, the change in the marketing of property in the time since 2015 to now? And I'm referring to the signs that are supposedly advertising the property, on the property, at the face of the property, or on the verge of the property, if there is a verge, and also the remote signs that direct primarily motorists to a property. Was there any understanding of the quite dramatic change in how to market properties in the 6 years?
Through your worship, yes, that did come through in submissions as well, and through our findings investigation. So through the course of this bylaw, there was the increasing use, or the start of the use back in when the bylaw was first adopted, around illumination of signs or the use of digital signs. And through the review, the position was taken in the statement of proposal that the governing body adopted for consultation, a desire to mainly retain the current rules as they currently were. So the new bylaw before you today is more take some clarifications about what those current rules and the intent of those were. So it does provide some scope for those things to occur. And again, in relation to illumination, there is that wider discussion around the unitary plan to be had.
Yeah, look, not quite addressing what I wanted there, Paul, but look, I totally respect your response there. And look, lastly, the urban design unit, what contribution did it make to this review? Was the urban design unit's view sought? Did it make a submission, or did it give, actually not a submission, did it give council feedback on the development of the bylaw?
So the staff from the design office and plans and places were engaged as part of the project, and we did have a representative on the project steering group as well. They did provide comments on those more critical aspects of the review, and again, there is this wider discussion that does need to happen at that unitary plan level. And the reason why I keep saying that is the way that this bylaw is a subset of the unitary plan. The unitary plan sets the overall strategic approach on how to manage signs, and the bylaw is one of the tools underneath that. Yes, back to you, members.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much. That's exhausted our questions. So are there any comments on the bylaw? I don't appear to have received any. So a big thanks to Councillors Cooper, Henderson and IMSB member Wilcox for the work they've done on it. These bylaws come into effect today, with the repeal of the old bylaw also today. So we're doing this in a very very timely way. So I'll put the recommendations A to K to members of the governing body. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. And I'll declare that carried, and I think unanimously. We